Hey crew, it's Ben, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we are going to be getting into the second book of Samuel. But before we begin, if you are new here, if you are unaware of what is going on, I have an unconventional Bible study because I hold unconventional beliefs. The things that I believe are not what you would normally see. And the Bible study that I hold, therefore, is not what you would normally see. If your feelings are easily hurt by anything, this is probably not the place for you. But if you're curious about the things that are unexplained or the things that just don't make sense in the Bible, this might be the place for you. And with that being said, I recommend that you start in Genesis because it can be a little bit hard to keep up. Today we are going to be diving back into David, and I'm going to assume that you all have been here and you have all understand what is going on. So, Saul has just died. Oh, he has killed himself but didn't quite get it done, so he had somebody else do it for him. And David, for some reason, didn't really want him dead. So, first, 2 Samuel. After the death of Saul, David returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag for 2 days. And on the third day, a man with torn clothes and dust on his head arrived from Saul's camp. And when he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay homage. Where have you come from? David asked. I have escaped from the Israelite camp, he replied. What was the outcome? David asked. Please tell me. And this is, I didn't do it. We left off. David had just raided and returned all of the people that were stolen from him when he reported with the Philistines to attack Saul. Right? Like he reported to attack and it didn't work out. So he comes home and his place, Ziklag, is raided. All of his wives, their children are gone, their livestock and their plunder are all gone. So he chases them down and he murders everybody. Now, he's getting his stuff back. You can talk about defense, but they didn't kill anybody. They took hostages and plunder. He went and he just destroyed them. Right or wrong, that is what happened. And now he is back and he has been somehow miraculously saved from being in the battle with Saul by having to go to a different battle where that plunder came from. I have escaped the Israelite camp. What was the outcome? Please tell me. The troops fled from the battle, he replied. Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are also dead. And then David asked the young man who had brought him the report, how do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead? I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, he replied, and there was Saul, leaning on his spear with the chariots and the cavalry closing in on him. And when he turned around and saw me, he called out, and I answered, Here I am. Who are you? He asked. And so I told him, I'm an Amalekite. And then he begged me, Stand over me and kill me, for my agony has seized me, but my life still lingers. And so I stood over him and killed him, because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band that was on his arm, and I brought them here to my Lord. And then David took hold of his own clothes and tore them, and all of the men who were with him did the same. They mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the people of the Lord and the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. And David inquired of the young man who had brought the report, Where are you from? I am the son of a foreigner, he answered. I am an Amalekite. Convenient. And David asked him, Why were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? And then David summoned one of the young men and said, Go, execute him. And so the young man struck him down, and he died. For David had said to the Amalekite, Your blood be on your own head, because your own mouth has testified against you, saying, I killed the Lord's anointed. That's because David is about to be the Lord's anointed, whether or not he actually was, right? Like the story goes that God chose Saul and then immediately regretted his decision and caused a rift between Samuel and Saul. And so Samuel delayed doing what God asked him to do for a while until God finally harassed him enough that he was like, all right, fine. I'll go out and do your will, Lord. And so he does. He goes and he makes special arrangements to sneak in and make a sacrifice. And he invites all of these people because he thinks that the anointed one's going to be there, but he's not there. And then he has to send specifically for this one kid that he didn't know about. And this kid shows up and he's like, this little ruddy boy who is very handsome, this is the exact guy that I want to take the place of. That's who God has decided this time. And so in doing what God has decided, he took this young boy and he anointed him king. But they didn't tell anybody. Like David knew, and David's father knew, and probably all of his brothers knew, but Samuel knew, but absolutely nobody else in the entirety of Israel knows that he's the anointed one. And at this point where we're at now, Samuel and Saul are dead, but still nobody but David and his immediate family know that he's the anointed one. Like even right now, nobody knows that. But David knows he's anointed, and he wants to set the precedent that you don't strike down the anointed one. Now, it may have already been a precedent. It may have already existed. There's evidence of that when Saul brought back the king that he conquered and got judged for that. Like that's literally why he got in trouble, for not killing the king. And so it's interesting that this now is a big deal because it's just convenient. Just as it's convenient that the guy who happened to be on the hill with the king of Israel and his commanders and his personal guard and all of this, and the guy who happened to land the falling blow, who we have already been told was the armor bearer, that guy, he gets away, but he's not an Israeli. He's an Amalekite. But the first thing he does is he runs to the anointed one who is living in the Philistine land and who was supposed to be fighting against said king. Like David, if events had played out the way that he wanted them to, would have been leading the charge against Israel here. But instead, he comes back and he has to kill these people who have plundered him, and they happen to have plundered some other places too. And then he sent out bribes because before David disappeared into the land of the Philistines, he was a bane of the existence of Israel. He was a highwayman and a bandit, strong-armed thug, kind of a mafioso type person, gang leader. And he was leaning on everybody, and things got hot. So Saul came out with 3,000 people, 3,000 fighting men to try to kill David and his 400 or 600. And so it's important to keep all of these things in mind. David very much is pointed towards becoming king from when he is a child. But he is very much pointed that way through subterfuge and deception and killing a lot of people. Like, don't get that twisted at all. David is very much bloodthirsty. His tens of thousands is a very real thing. And so it's extremely convenient that the guy who happened to be on the hill happened to run back to David and report, and then happened to die after giving him the crown and the bangle. It's just coincidence, I'm sure. Like, I am sure David did not arrange for that situation to happen at all. I am sure he did not arrange for the armor bearer of the king to be the one to strike him down and then kill that guy, because it is not in his character, as we have seen, right? It is not in his character to do such a thing, to kill somebody who has done something for him. Or is it? All right. David's song for Saul and Jonathan. And then David took up this lament for Saul and his son Jonathan, and he ordered that the sons of Judah be taught the song of the bow, as it is written in the book of Jasher. Now, we do not have, as far as we know, an accurate representation of the book of Jasher. I would love to have the accurate, like it's like Enoch, though. We're not sure. Like Enoch, first Enoch, the original, is got a higher likelihood of being correct, right? None of this is exactly correct, but it has a higher likelihood of being what they referenced than the second. We have that sort of a problem with Jasher. It's one of those things that I wish it would have been canon and passed down so we could actually see what is going on. But because there are some interesting stories that should be told from there. The Song of the Bow. Your glory, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, and proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, and the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. O mountains of Gilboa, may you have no dew or rain, no fields yielding offerings of grain. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul, no longer anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not retreat, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and delightful in life, were not divided in death. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Were they? O daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and luxury, who decked your garments with ornaments of gold. How the mighty have fallen in the thick of battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were delightful to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war have perished. Now, we have talked before, and I'm sure it sets people off, but there is a very, very strong likelihood that David was bisexual, at a minimum, and that he may have even been overcompensating with his concubines. And so, in my estimation, him and Jonathan had an extremely close relationship, right? Like, no, I love my homeboys. Like, I would go to battle with my homeboys. I don't have a single homeboy that couldn't call me up and I'd be like, hey, bro, this is the situation. And it'd be a legitimate situation, not some bullshit, but like, I'm going to ride with him, and if I die, I die. It's what's up, right? There's not a single one of them that I would ever say this to. Your love was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women. That is, I will never say that to a man. You might. Other people might. Maybe that's a thing. But for me, no. The love of my woman is better than all things, other than the love of God, right? And so, no. But this is another one of those little clues, one of those little hints that maybe things weren't quite what we think they were, right? Maybe things weren't quite what we've been led to believe for our entire life. Now, there's an extremely good chance that he had the same type of relationship with Saul from the time that he was a very young man, when he played the harp so skillfully and he could quiet the beast so artfully. That is a possibility. And sometime later, David inquired of the Lord, should I go up to one of the towns of Judah? And go up, the Lord answered. And David asked, where should I go? To Hebron, replied the Lord. Now, also remember that David was only in the land of the Philistines for 1 year and 4 months, like total. That's including the expedition up here to not go to war with Israel, the return, and the chasing down of the people, and that whole situation, plus all the raids that he did into the land of Israel. That was all within 1 year and 4 months. And so now he's got word that Saul is dead, And he's like, okay, so when do I begin the conquest? Go up, the Lord answered. And David asked, where do I go? To Hebron. Again. I have talked before, and I will most definitely talk again. Hebron is one of the power centers for these entities. It is one of the places that is most desired by these entities. I don't know why, but it seems to be. They didn't tell him to go to Jerusalem yet. Like, that comes in a little bit, and not to discount that, and just, we got a lot to talk about there, but the first thing they go to do, Hebron. The first place they went to scout, Hebron. Like, when Abraham come through the land, it was Hebron. When they made the covenant and set up the thing, it was Hebron. Hebron is the place. Like, people get tied up in Jerusalem because it's the city of David. But David's first city was Hebron. For a specific amount of time. We're going to get into that too. And David went there with his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. We talked about that already. And David also took the men who were with him, each with his household, and they settled in the towns near Hebron. So he's taken all the people from Ziklag, the people that he just rescued, and all of that. And they're going and settling in the towns near Hebron. And then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul. So David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead to tell them, the Lord bless you because you showed this kindness to Saul your Lord when you buried him. Now, may the Lord show you loving devotion and faithfulness, and I will also show you the same favor because you have done this. Now, then, be strong and courageous, for though Saul your Lord is dead, the house of Judah has anointed me as their king. Now, they went and took Hebron, right? And when they went and settled this land with 600 fighting men and their people, right? That's a large force. We've talked about that. And going into these cities outlying Hebron, these people, in the interest of self-preservation, their king has just died. They have no unified force. They go and they decide, okay, we've got somebody here. We're going to make him king. And so that's where this happens from, right? It wasn't like he didn't necessarily have to conquer Hebron. When he went to take Hebron, they just kind of went in and took over the land. And then the people of Judea were looking for the singular actor to keep them from being oppressed. That is the history, right? That is the history of the judges, or single actors doing the thing that needs to be done. And that's what they're looking for here from the king that they are anointing. And it's interesting to note that Judah and Israel are not one even now. So this is anointed to the king of Judah. Meanwhile, Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, took Saul's son Ishbosheth and moved him to Manaheim and made him king over Gilead, Asher, Jezreel, Ephraim, and Benjamin, over all Israel. So that's an interesting too, right? That is the northernish parts, but Benjamin is in the middle of Judah. Like, that's weird. Maybe Benjamin kind of expanded, maybe Judah kind of retracted. I don't know what happened there, but Benjamin is in Judah. And so there is a separation right here already between two kings. You have Abner, the king of Israel, and you have David, the king of Judah. And Saul's son Ishbosheth was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned for 2 years. So this is Saul's son, the rightful king of Israel, versus the house of Judah, however, followed David. And the length of time that David was king over Hebron, over the house of Judah, was 7 years and 6 months, so 7.5 years. And one day Abner, son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, marched out from Manaheim to Gibeon. And so Joab, son of Zeruiah, along with the servants of David, marched out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. And the two camps took up positions on opposite sides of the pool. And then Abner said to Joab, "Let us have the young men get up and compete before us." "Let them get up," Joab replied. And so they got up and were counted off, 12 for Benjamin and Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and 12 for David. And then each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his sword into his opponent's side, and they all fell together. And so this place, which is in Gibeon, is called Helkath Hazorim. The battle that day was intense, and Abner and the men of Israel were defeated by the servants of David. This is an interesting battle practice. Like, you just keep killing each other all at once? Like, it's very organized. I don't know that I would have ever thought of something like this. Like, I can almost understand single combat, although that is an incredibly risky thing to do, right? Single combat should only be the lesser person trying to make that happen. But this is 12 by 12. They just pair up and grab each other by the head and jug each other with a sword. And whoever winds up with the most people dead loses? Like, I don't understand the mechanics of this battle. It was a fierce battle, right? The battle was intense, not fierce. And then Abner and his men were defeated. So eventually, I guess they lost heart, and they're like, "Damn, they're not giving up." Like, maybe the Judeans were better at hitting the heart and causing them to die quickly. I don't know. Like, the mechanics are weird. Taking apart from the fact that this is a sacrifice. This is supposed to be God's chosen nation. This is not a chosen nation. This is a bitter and divisive people being bitter and divisive to themselves. This is David usurping the throne. He is, in my estimation, probably arranged for the death of Saul. And he is probably was going to betray the Philistines. Like, almost certainly he was going to betray the Philistines. And after that, just assume, like, sweep through, let Saul fall, and then take the others from behind, right? That's probably what was going to happen. But it didn't work out that way, and so he had to bribe his way into Judea. And the people who made him king, he sent bribes to before he showed up. But the mechanics are weird. And the three sons of Zeruiah were there: Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now, Asahel was fleet of foot like a wild gazelle, and he chased Abner, not turning to the right or to the left in his pursuit. And Abner glanced back and said, "Is that you, Asahel?" "It is," Asahel replied. And so Abner told him, "Turn to your right or your left, seize one of the young men, and take his equipment for yourself." But Asahel would not stop chasing him. And once again Abner warned Asahel, "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How could I show my face to your brother Joab?" But Asahel refused to turn away. So Abner thrust the butt of his spear into the stomach, and it came out his back, and he fell dead on the spot. And every man paused when he came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, and by sunset they had gone as far as the hill of Ammah, opposite Giah, on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. And the Benjamites rallied to Abner, formed a single unit, and took their stand atop a hill. And then Abner called out to Joab, "Must the sword devour forever? Do you not realize that this will only end in bitterness? How long before you tell the troops to stop pursuing their brothers?" "As surely as God lives," Joab replied, "if you had not spoken up, the troops would have continued pursuing their brothers until morning. And so Joab blew the ram's horn. All the troops stopped. They no longer pursued Israel or continued to fight. And all that night Abner and his men marched through the Arabah. They crossed the Jordan, marched all morning, and arrived at Mahanaim. And when Joab returned from pursuing Abner, he gathered all his troops. In addition to Asahel, 19 of David's servants were missing. But they had struck down 360 Benjamites who were with Abner. And later, they took Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb in Bethlehem. And then Joab and his men marched all night and reached Hebron at daybreak. So, again, the mechanics are weird, right? Because if they're lining up 12 by 12, and they're stabbing each other with swords, and the battle was intense, was it just those 12? So it was those 12 plus 7 who died in the pursuit. Because you have 19 from David's side dead, and 360 Benjamites. Now, the 360 is an interesting number, right? That's the degrees in a circle, and there might be a whole nother line of thought that you can trace off right here that I'm not going to bother getting into. But what happened here was they met in battle, and Abner lost. So him and his men fled. And once again, Judea did what Judea does. And they did not allow the fleeing. Right? They did not allow them to disappear. They chased them without ceasing. And then Abner warns Asahel twice. He's like, don't make me kill you, bruh. And then he does. And that's going to come back to bite him in the ass later. But for now, like, he was trying to avoid this outcome. He told him twice, stop chasing me. Why are you chasing me? Obviously, we're not trying to fight. It goes from being self-defense to not really quickly. All right. Now, the war between the house of Saul and the house of David was protracted. And David grew stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. And the sons born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, by Ahinoam of Jezreel. His second was Chileab, by Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. His third was Absalom, the son of Michal, daughter of King Talmi of Geshur. The fourth was Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth was Shephatiah, the son of Abital. And his sixth was Ithream, by David's wife Eglah. These sons were born to David in Hebron. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 heirs who are all in line before Solomon. And during the war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner had continued to strengthen his position in the house of Saul. Meanwhile, Saul had a concubine named Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. So Ishbosheth questioned Abner, why do you sleep with my father's concubine? And Abner was furious over Ishbosheth's accusation. Am I the head of a dog that belongs to Judah? He asked, all this time I have been loyal to the house of your father Saul, to his brothers, to his friends. I have not delivered you into the hand of David, but now you accuse me of wrongdoing with this woman? May God punish Abner and ever so severely if I do not do for David what the Lord has sworn to him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and to establish the throne of David over Israel and Judah, from Dan to Beersheba. And for fear of Abner, Ishbosheth did not dare say another word to him. And then Abner sent messengers in his place to say to David, to whom does the land belong? Make your covenant with me, and surely my hand will be with you to bring all Israel over to you. Good, replied David. I will make a covenant with you, but there is one thing I require of you. Do not appear before me unless you bring Saul's daughter, Michal, when you come to see me. And then David sent messengers to say to Ishbosheth of Saul, "Give me back my wife Michal, whom I betrothed to myself, for 100 Philistine foreskins." And so Ishbosheth sent and took Michal and her husband, Palatiel, son of Laish, and her husband followed her, weeping, all the way to Bahurim. And then Abner said to him, "Go back." So he returned home. And now Abner conferred with the elders of Israel and said, "In the past you sought David as your king. Now take action, because the Lord has said to David, 'Through my servant David I will save my people Israel from the hands of the Philistines and all their enemies.'" And Abner also spoke to the Benjamites and went to Hebron to tell David that all seemed good to Israel and to the whole house of Benjamin. And when Abner and 20 of his men came to David at Hebron, David held a feast for them. And then Abner said to David, "Let me go at once, and I will gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they make a covenant with you, that you may rule over all that your heart desires." And so David dismissed Abner, and he went in peace. So, what just happened, right? Abner is the commander of the forces. He is doing all the military things for Ishbosheth, who is the son of Saul, the rightful king of Israel. Now, Ishbosheth finds out that this guy is sleeping with his father's widow, and maybe there was something going on before he was a widow. Who knows? But for some reason he's offended, and he's like, "Why are you sleeping with my father's widow?" Like concubine and wife are very loose terms. And so Abner gets mad, and he's like, "You know what? All you have is because of me. I'm going to sell you out to Judah." And so that's what he does. He makes a deal. But in order to consummate this deal, what does he do? David, in his extreme righteousness, once again wants another man's wife. Wants it down. You can already make the argument about, well, she was betrothed to him, and he paid the betrothal fee of 100 foreskins. Whatever. He wants another man's wife. She has been with this man for a while now, right? They are happy together. There is no reason, like Saul is dead. Saul was the one who broke covenant, not her. And so there is no reason for this other than coveting your neighbor's things and, envy and lust, right? Adultery is heavy here because you are intentionally twice now taking another man's wife. And so, sure, why not make him king now? Like, the first time he took a man's wife, he didn't, he was a bandit. He was a mafioso. He's out there doing strong arm tactics on the local herdsmen. And he takes one of their wives. And so you make him king of Judea. And as king of Judea, he takes another man's wife. And then he becomes king of all Israel. It's amazing how that works for him. What happens when he takes the next man's wife past this one? Well, then he wins a whole lot more battles. I wonder what God he was serving. I wonder which entity in control of which principality he was serving. And so he takes this man's wife, and this man follows down the road crying because they are taking his wife, whom he has a life with. Once again, this is breaking apart a home. Like Israel came in and broke apart a land where people were dwelling peacefully among themselves. And they came in and they caused a ruckus. And now they're breaking apart a marriage just because. Just for the hell of it. It's not like he didn't care. It's not like she didn't care. They actually cared for each other. But this righteous man, he wants his due. This is my due. I'm the king. And if you want to deal with me, then you will bring me another man's wife. And that is perfectly fine in the sight of God. Yeah, okay. And so David dismissed Abner and he went in peace. But just then David's soldiers and Joab returned from a raid, bringing with them a great plunder. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, because David had sent him on his way in peace. And when Joab and all his troops arrived, he was informed. Abner, son of Ner, came to see the king, who sent him on his way in peace. And so Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why did you dismiss him? Now he is getting away. Surely you realize that Abner, son of Ner, came to deceive you and to track your movements and all that you were doing." And as soon as Joab had left David, he sent messengers after Abner, who brought him back from the well of Sirah. But David was unaware of it. Sure he was. Because we have precedent that David is completely unaware of things. Nobody ever says that David is going to find out. Nobody ever says that. And so David, again, is just conveniently left out of the decision. And when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab pulled him aside into the gateway, as if to speak to him privately. And there Joab stabbed him in the stomach. And so Abner died on account of the blood of Joab's brother, Asahel. Well, it sounds like Joab's a great guy to have around. Because Abner tried not to kill his brother Asahel, and you can talk about blood debts and all of that, whatever, but through subterfuge and deception, in the name of the king, this man who was sent in peace, his blood is spilled. At a minimum, Joab should die. At a minimum, Joab should die. And afterward, David heard about this and said, "I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May it whirl over the heads of Joab and the entire house of his father. And may the house of Joab never be without one having a discharge or skin disease, or one who leans on the staff or falls by the sword or lacks food." And Joab and his brother Abishai murdered Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in the battle at Gibeon. And then David ordered Joab and all the people with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner." And King David himself walked behind the funeral bier. And when they buried Abner in Hebron, the king wept aloud at Abner's tomb. And all the people wept. And the king sang this lament for Abner. "Should Abner die the death of a fool? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As a man falls before the wicked, so also you fell." Completely blameless. Completely blameless. Your hands were not bound. Your feet were not fettered. I sent you on your way in peace. Sure. It's just mighty convenient that now the commander of the opponent's armies is dead. After coming to you in peace. And all the people wept over him even more. And then all the people came and urged David to eat something while it was still day. But David took an oath, saying, "May God punish me, and ever so severely, if I taste bread or anything else before the sun sets." Such a noble sacrifice. And all the people took note and were pleased. In fact, everything the king did pleased them. Yeah, because they might die if not. And so, on that day, all the troops of all of Israel were convinced that the king had no part in the murder of Abner, son of Ner. And then the king said to his servants, "Do you not realize that a great prince has fallen today in Israel? I am weak this day, though anointed as king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too fierce for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil. We'll go ahead and do 4. Now when Ishbosheth, son of Saul, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage, and all Israel was dismayed. Saul's son had 2 men who were leaders of raiding parties. One was named Bana, and the other Rashab, and they were sons of Ramon, the Beerothite, of the tribe of Benjamin. And Beeroth is considered part of Benjamin because the Beerothites fled to Gideon and have lived there as foreigners to this day. And Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the report came about Saul, and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but as she was hurrying to escape, he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. Now, they chose names that just rolled off the tongue. Mephibosheth. Now, Rashab and Bana, the sons of Ramon and the Beerothite, set out and arrived at the house of Ishbosheth in the heat of the day, while the king was taking his midday nap. They entered the interior of the house as if to get some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. And then Rashab and his brother Bana slipped away. They had entered the house where Ishbosheth was lying in his bed. Having stabbed and killed him, they beheaded him, took his head, and traveled all night by way of the Arabah. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron, and said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy who sought your life. Today the Lord has granted vengeance to my lord the king against Saul and his offspring." But David answered Rashab and his brother Bana, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all distress, when someone told me, 'Look, Saul is dead,' and thought he was a bearer of good news, I seized him and put him to death at Ziklag. That was the reward for his news. How much more when wicked men kill a righteous man in his own house and on his own bed? Shall I not now require his blood from your hands and remove you from the earth?" So David commanded his young men, and they killed Rashab and Bana. They cut off their hands and feet and hung their bodies by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb in Hebron. And the next time when we come back, we will be dealing with David becoming king of all Israel, because somehow conveniently both the general and the current king of Israel, miraculously, upon no orders from the king, died in the same manner. They both died by a knife in the stomach through subterfuge and deception. Through no order of the king, of course. I mean, he wrote a whole poem and everything. It was like 4 whole bars. Did you not see that? That was like, 20 words. And everybody was convinced because he wrote a poem of 20 words. Now, there may have been more to the poem, right? That's not the point. The point is that somehow, conveniently, the 2 main enemies that he is facing is dead. Now, he disavows that vehemently. Governments aren't prone to do that. I hope you know that. Like, if the government acts deceptively and does something that might cause strife and discord, they immediately tell you about it. They don't hide that behind conspiracy, lies, and secrecy at all. Like, they are very forthright and open throughout the history of mankind. Like, no governments anywhere make a habit of lying and deceiving. There's no history of history being written by the victors. That's not a thing. There's a logically inconsistent problem here now. It could be very well that it happened exactly like it laid out. I doubt it. I made that clear, I hope. David was not a righteous man by any measure whatsoever other than conquest. He's very good at conquest. If you're looking for a strong man who's good at killing people, David is your guy. If you're looking for a just ruler, he is not. If you're wanting to keep your wife, he's not the dude. If you're wanting to keep your sons, he's not the dude. And so we have, again, a patriarch problem, right? Now, he's not a patriarch of all Israel the way the others were, but they had the same problem. It's not just, there's a redemption arc later. Whatever. The problem is that this God is consistently, and I mean consistently, rewarding the wrong people. He is giving things to the people who do the wrong things. Now, they try to justify it because it is this divine anointing that Samuel put on David that caused him to do all these wrong things. No. I'm fully aware that conquest is the history of history. There is no history anywhere without some conquest involved. It doesn't matter what peoples you claim. All of them have been involved in conquest at some point or another. So I'm not mad at the conquest, but that is exactly what is happening. This is the subjugation, possibly by a Philistine, of the Israelis. Not even the land of Canaan yet. He is subjugating at this point God's people to his will. Now, it seems like if they were God's people and they were witnesses to all the things, then the proclamation would be enough, that Samuel would have been able to override Saul. But that is not nearly what happened. God got disappointed in Saul, declared a new king, and then 40 years later, there's a new king. That is a consistency problem in the nature of God. There are many consistency problems in the nature of God recorded in this book. Those are the things that I'm pointing out. I don't care about the conquest. Yes, it was bloody. Yes, it was terrible. But that's history. That's what happened. They did not have possession of the full land of Israel, but a short time. And yet we have a whole mindset that they were in possession of this and it was rightfully theirs from the time of Abraham. They didn't even have possession of it at all in the time of Abraham. At all. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a very complicated topic. I know that I hold some very unconventional beliefs, and I know that I tend to step on toes when I talk about these things. I don't mean to, but I am not going to apologize for it. It is what it is. The book is written like the book is written, and it is not quite how we have been taught it is. All I am trying to do is what he has called me to do, and that is to show the things that I find. It is what it is. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Tea. Peace.